Oh, error. Wait a minute. Error occurred. I think it's maybe Twitter's broken.
It said the stream is live, Matt. I think we're on the air.
Are we? All right. Are we on the air, folks? Can people hear us? Because my thing says that we're not on the air.
Okay.
Huh.
Live. We're here, Matt. They can see us.
Okay, you can see us. Yes. All right, good. All right, yes, good.
Okay.
Very strange. All right, my StreamYard says that I'm not on the air, but okay. Well, welcome to ATW Live Monday. This is like a historic moment again. We're in the middle of a campaign. Something absolutely crazy is happening. Walter, how do we even summarize what's going on? Right now, apparently, there's going to be an interview of Donald Trump by Elon Musk on this platform. We're going to try to look in briefly at some point, although we heard that it wasn't going so well at the beginning or that there was a technical issue. But in the run-up to this, historic things happened. Should we summarize it or should we just get into the video? What do you think we should do?
Well, we'll summarize it. The evil dark lords of old Europe who resent the American experiment and think that they can unwind it finally have issued a stern letter and other statements to the world's richest man and the owner of X that he may be violating all sorts of non-specific laws by interviewing Donald Trump, our American former president and current presidential candidate, using their armies. Are they going to use their armies against us, or just their residual moral authority, which has dwindled to nothing in my eyes? They have, they have barked from behind the chain link fence at both our country, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and the whole concept of free speech.
Wait, hold on a second. Now I'm seeing people saying that we're not on. It looks like we might not be on Twitter or X. Can people hear us? There are people who can hear us on. All right. We are on. Okay,
you
good.
Are on.
We're on YouTube.
Let's just pretend we're on. Yeah.
Let's just pretend we're on. We're on YouTube. I think we're on Rumble. Right. X, who knows? It looks, and that's actually the subject of this thing.
Well, because the lasers, Matt, the anti-free speech satellite, Shutmouth 2000 that orbits over the North Atlantic has sent rays down into Twitter headquarters that are going to interrupt the thing. And I wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, unless there are technical difficulties, then Donald Trump is no longer the threat they say he is.
Yeah. Look, they sent a letter from Thierry Breton, who's the EC commissioner, or their Europe's commissioner, whatever the title is, and it's essentially like an injunction letter. It's a warning to that you must stay in compliance with the Digital Services Act. We can get into what those laws are, but there's in the run up to this, there was concern by all of these various media outlets in Europe. Let's just take a look at BBC and see how they presented this whole thing.
Sure.
Billionaire entrepreneur Elon Musk is due to interview the Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump on the X social media network in just a few hours' time. The event could provide former President Trump the opportunity to seize the limelight at a time when his campaign appears to have lost some momentum. But it's raised questions about the power of the X social media network and how Elon Musk is using it. Let's cross live to Julia Manchester, political reporter at The Hill. Julia, what's the response at the moment to this upcoming interview?
Well, look, it's certainly interesting because this is the first time we've seen Trump and Elon Musk sit down in an interview on X. Now, you'll remember that just over a year ago, we saw Elon Musk interview Florida Governor Ron DeSantis shortly after he launched his presidential campaign. Obviously, Ron DeSantis, eventually suspended his presidential campaign. But that interview was really riddled with a number of technical difficulties. It seemed to just be a very poor rollout. X X, Elon Musk and Ron DeSantis got some backlash for that rollout, for that interview. So, it'll be interesting to see how this one goes. I imagine that it's taken, in over a year, Elon Musk has been able to sort of, and the X team have maybe been able to iron through some of those technical difficulties, but definitely something to watch, considering these two men are, people who are very much trying to cater towards a very similar audience, a conservative-leaning audience, an audience that isn't as friendly with Democrats. So it'll be interesting to watch.
Obviously, it raises questions about the power, the political power that can be used by the owner of this vast network, and questions about what the US government and other governments could do to regulate and control and limit that power. The European Commission, we see today, has just written to Elon Musk reminding him of his legal responsibilities around harmful content and public disorder ahead of that interview, also warning of interim measures if it breaches the rules. Is there that concern now? Of course, there'll be a lot of different political views on this.
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
I've seen enough. As Walter, as you pointed out, there's such a thing as NPR voice, but BBC voice is maybe just as bad, right?
Only in BBC voice can you make the word owner sound suspicious, sound a little untoward. First of all, did you notice that subliminally the video that they played along with that clip of Elon Musk was meant to make him look like a total fool? They showed a little tiny animation of him dancing next to a Cybertruck in some, fantastic video mashup, and then he was in front of various neon lights and other unserious backdrops. The American involved here, I watched the rest of the interview, which we didn't, keep up on the screen.
We couldn't. Yeah.
Well, she didn't mention when she was asked if there was concern that there's a constitution in America that allows people to do these crazy things. She acted as though they both, even though they're supposedly on different continents, are just going to go backstage after this interview and hug each other and, cry about the future of, our free alliance or something.
The context of this is incredible. They're sort of creating out of thin air the idea that it's a news story, that there are internet platforms that have power, and that people exercise that power by putting politicians on it, as if that doesn't go on constantly on every other platform, on television, on cable. What is the
BBC's special sanction that allows it to interview world figures but finds it a news story when others do? And what I want to say in general is, she then said the letter reminded Musk of his legal responsibilities. Well, I doubt he recognizes them, first of all.
Let's look at the letter, because while you make the commentary, because it's really kind of incredible, the text of it. But go ahead, Walter.
Well, yeah, I mean, she acted as though these are things that we recognize in America and even in England. I mean, does England have to abide by EU rules? I'm not sure they do, right?
Yes, they do. Everybody who's a party to the Digital Services Act, including any carrier that wants access to European customers, has to abide by DSA rules if they want to continue operating in that area. That's why this is such a controversial measure, because essentially what Breton is writing, he sends him a letter. He says, I'm writing to you in the context of recent events in the United Kingdom and in relation to the planned broadcast on your platform X of a live conversation between a U.S. presidential candidate and yourself, which will be accessible. I understand that you are currently doing a stress test. In this contest, I am compelled to remind you of the due diligence obligations set out in the Digital Services Act as outlined in my previous letter. So the DSA requires every platform that operates in Europe to abide by or to sort of enforce the judgments of they're trusted flaggers. They have a list of these groups that sort of police the internet and find what they call illegal content. And what they're worried about, particularly in this case, is hate speech. Hate speech is defined in the DSA according to the EU law. So I can find that definition for you in a second here.
Well, I mean, he said he's writing in light of what's going on in Britain. He means these riots.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is absolutely outrageous that you would suggest that an American presidential candidate is in some fashion responsible for British riots, or would have such prestige and influence in England that he could call them off or start them up again. I mean, even to imply that is insane. But they're trying to create legal precedent and pretext for all kinds of things. I said to you before the show, are we going to see an American presidential candidate yanked, extradited from the U.S. during a campaign and brought to The Hague?
Well, we can't even rule that out because of what happened. If we could look at the extradition clip where the director of prosecutions in the UK over the weekend was talking about rounding in response to a question specifically about rounding up about whether or not Elon Musk might be subject to prosecution. This is the police chief.
We will throw the full force of the law at people, and whether you're in this country committing crimes on the streets or committing crimes from further afield online,
right?
We will come after you.
Talk to me about that, because we have seen some high-profile figures whipping up the hatred. You talked about it in there with the officers, in fact, about this being added to by online commentary. I mean, I'm even thinking of the likes of Elon Musk getting involved. What are you considering when it comes to dealing with people who are whipping up this kind of behaviour from behind a keyboard and maybe in a different country?
Being a keyboard warrior does not make you safe from the law. You can be guilty of offences of incitement, of stirring up racial hatred. There are numerous terrorist offences regarding the sort of publishing of material. All of those offences are in play if people are provoking hatred and violence on the streets, and we will come after those individuals just as we will physically confront on the streets the thugs and the yobs who are causing the problems for communities.
Right. How in the world are they going to come after those individuals in foreign countries?
They're talking about extraditing. I mean, that was with the context of the question. We will come after you, in jurisdictions beyond, whether it's here or somewhere beyond. The question specifically asks about other countries.
So Matt, this is all a subliminal attempt to get us to accept the idea of Atlantia, an international state whose chief citizen is maybe somebody like or chief inspector is somebody like Christopher Steele, who came over in 2016 and destroyed our politics with his bullshit Russiagate thing, and who has actually been weighing in on this current riot situation. I saw the other day that he was quoted as saying they were definitely somehow the work of, or partly the work of, Russian agents. So this is the same composite body that has never been recognized in any legal sense, but consists of these allied bureaucracies that is attempting to police our speech, our politics, and now our presidential election.
Right. This is an overt attempt to get in the middle of an American presidential campaign. There's no other way to look at this, because unless they sincerely believe that Donald Trump is going to get up and say something that would qualify as hate speech under EU law, there's absolutely no reason to send a letter like that, unless they're trying to somehow get the owner of X to worry about the penalties that could be invoked by a violation of the DSA, which is something they really do have to consider, even if they, they're trying to oppose it. it's they do have to consider this because they need the revenue. If you're going to be one of these big platforms, you can't just forego Europe.
They
it
are
doesn't
so
work that way.
they are so advanced. They are so advanced in their smart police state there that they are not only inhibiting and censoring speech, but they're trying to block people hearing it. I wonder if in some ways, aside from the pseudo legalities of all this that may turn into real legalities, and the threats to Elon Musk and so on, this is kind of a veiled threat that you had better watch what you listen to. You had better think about your consumption habits, not just what comes out of your mouth, but what goes into your ears and eyes. We noted, or someone did last week, that being a bystander at these British riots is itself apparently criminal, or nearly so now. So they're trying to draw a line around a whole universe of discourse, make it dubious, perhaps dangerous, and lay in all these sort of vague predicates for action of some kind, which I expect we'll see. Why not test it? Of course they'll test it.
Right. Why not invoke some kind of way to see if people can be prosecuted according to European laws, or suffer some kind of penalty, right? I mean, that's not out of the realm of possibility. And look, we saw this in the Twitter files. This is part of the Aspen Institute's discussions. They overtly have been trying to find a way to move America in the direction of European-style speech laws, particularly hate speech laws, right? We even saw Tim Walz make this comment last week that there's no protection in the U.S. There's no constitutional right to misinformation and hate speech, which was incorrect. He just said that, but it's commonly believed now in the United States that hate speech is actually against the law, because in so many other parts of the world it is now. And there's all this pressure now is coming on, but they're trying to define an interview with a presidential candidate as hate speech.
Well, as something that should be restrained in advance, perhaps, because it might result in hate speech. This isn't even pre-crime. This is pre-possible crime. In other words, they don't know that it will happen, but it could. I mean, Donald Trump could call for the murder of England's top pop stars. I mean, maybe we should, restrain him on that basis. So, but I'm going to hammer this point, which I don't think has been made enough. There is some attempt to have a transnational identity here. Remember that it was Prince Harry who came over here and became the Aspen Institute's misinformation or disinformation expert. Remember that?
Yeah, him and Katie Couric were the key.
And it was Christopher Steele who came in 2016 and delivered this dossier or whatever of made up illiterate charges. And so overall, there is an attempt to make us in America citizens of this larger, NATO, EU, transatlantic body of right-thinking people, and take away all the specifics of speech suppression and so on. And what's really going on, even in that interview with those two very similar journalists who were kind of, vociferously agreeing in a way, that we have now to operate by standards which are formed somewhere else than the United States.
Right. We have to go along with the rest of the civilized world. And we're in this new era where people are out of touch with the fact that there is a fundamental difference in how Americans look at the world and how Europeans look at the world. And this has been an important difference always, dating back, to the revolution really, but certainly since World War II, it's been a stark difference in how we think about these things, right? The United States has this, from the very beginning, we have had a tradition that the government does not have a role. The Constitution specifically restrains the government from having a role. They see it completely the opposite, that the government is an agent for sort of guaranteeing a safe space and standards and all these things, which is, it's a way to look at things, but it's not our way of looking at things. People have been sort of ready to forego the American way of looking at this because of all these superficial things that are happening with Donald Trump, and they're just ready to join the European Party, which is, illegal content. This whole idea of illegal content is crazy to me. What citizen in a free country even thinks that's a thing?
Well, as I say, the whole day when we've been, thinking and contemplating this letter, I've wondered, what are they specifically worried about him saying? Of course, it's a dodge. They're not worried about anything. They just want to set the precedent of, disciplining and policing an American election from abroad, using these arcane, no longer that arcane rules. But what could he say? Let's think about it. Go to the Bastille, Frenchman. Your leaders are corrupt. Your pure bodily fluids have been invaded by those of lesser beings.
Right. Well, that would be what they're afraid of, right? Like, look what happened to your beautiful England when you let your precious bodily fluids be sapped and impurified by the Muslim invaders, right? That's what they're worried about him saying.
No, they're not. They're not worried about. They hope he says that. Matt, if he were to be so stupid as to say something that horrid, they would rejoice. It would become the pretext for a kind of series of actions that they have been hoping they would be able to enact. In fact, it's not going to be that. He's speaking to he doesn't want to win the European elections, okay? The whole reason Donald Trump is speaking tonight is to win the American presidency. Yeah. I don't think he doesn't give a damn about what's going on, or fomenting or not fomenting any kind of social movement in England or France or Belgium. He's going to talk about the American presidency. That's what they don't want.
Yeah,
they don't want him to have a successful night. I mean, and let's get real for a second. Anybody from the Bronx knows that.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. I mean, well, let's see. Are we able to look at what's going on with Trump and Elon right now? I mean, I'm not even sure that we're on X at the moment. Right. So let's see. Yeah, it doesn't look like it's actually up yet, right?
Well, I don't know. I mean,
well, let's take a look at
click on that his microphone icon and get anything.
Yeah. People are saying X is having trouble. There's only music playing there right now, says one commenter. So that's interesting. All right, so let's take a look at what people are saying. We were taking bets earlier today about how long it would take to hear the word joy if we poked into CNN or MSNBC. Or conversely complaining about joy on Fox, right? So we could test any one of these theories. Let's see if we can look at MSNBC or CNN. What's going on these channels? Here we go.
Accounts as well.
Yeah.
One thing to keep in mind, as you pointed out, is that Roger Stone is no stranger to this world. Yeah. Roger Stone was convicted back in the day of lying to Congress about his efforts to find out what emails had been stolen from Hillary Clinton and Democrats. So there is a degree of irony here, but I think also you have to just think now of this space as being a space full of people trying to play dirty tricks, full of people in foreign countries as well, trying to both access information and, depending on which country you're talking about, depending on what they get, manipulate that information.
Now, one thing I noted that's noted in your reporting, and I noted in the introduction, is that, over the weekend, Stephen Chung, who's a spokesperson for the Trump campaign.
All right, let's look at CNN. Let's see if we can see if that's on, if they're in an ad break or not. I don't know. I mean, the hacker story, dude, I know that was in the news.
You mean
Scott,
but-
these are small.
the alleged hack by Iran of the Trump campaign
Campaign
computers?
should not be overconfident.
Here we go. Here
And
we
they
go.
should be confident. They should be happy.
The
Energy
magic
and
wall
enthusiasm
here.
help. When your party
Let's see
won
how
the
this
last
goes.
election, if you can put that coalition back together, maybe you can win the next election. But so they've made a lot of progress. Like I said, they still have challenges. Can you get the Nikki Haley voters, the suburban Republicans, the Reagan Republicans? Can you get back a slice of those young voters who are still holding out because they're mad at President Biden over
The Nikki
Israel
Haley
and
voter.
Hamas, Palestine, and she is his vice president. To Scott's point, can she somehow find a way to thread that needle, find the right nuance? There are challenges going forward. But to the point about change, I don't have the numbers here. Go deep into the New York Times Siena polling. This country wants change. I can tell you that from traveling the last year. And when they had the Biden-Trump choice, there were a lot of people who were just exasperated by it. If you look at now, when they ask Trump versus Harris, who's the candidate that would bring good change? The numbers have flipped dramatically. People view her not just as change in how she looks, not just as different. And Governor Walz helps here as well because he's different and he's new. People want new and different. They're tired after COVID, after inflation, after Biden and Trump. So she has that advantage right now. Gives her an opportunity to pull people in. Can she take advantage of it is the question.
Kate,
Some
Vice President Harris and Joe
people
Biden are campaigning together later this week. Do you think they're going to do that a lot in the coming months, or do you think she's going to keep some distance?
Well, I believe him when he says that he'll do whatever she thinks is helpful. And so I'm sure he will take his cues from her and from her campaign. He wants to do nothing but be helpful to her. I think he has a...
See, I can't keep straight. Is Kate Bedingfield now an anchor, or is she still a Biden person, or what's the deal?
That other Democrats have struggled with over the last couple of decades. And so that's a place where I think he can
It'd be
really
much
helpful. I would
calmer if
imagine
you
we would
stop
see him
insisting
out.
on
I imagine
making
you'll
such
see him
distinctions.
speaking in
man.
Pennsylvania.
Right.
You'll see him in Scranton, his hometown, as a place where he can help kind of put that bigger, broader coalition together. So I would imagine that they will use him strategically on that front. And John sort of touched on the question I had in his answer to Van, but part of the discussion over the course of this last 10 months has been about young voters, whether they can sort of overcome some of this frustration that they have, particularly around the Gaza issue. And I'm wondering if you see, John, that these young voters see Vice President Harris as aligned with Joe Biden. Does she carry that burden, I guess, that Joe Biden has had with young voters over the Gaza issue? Or do they see her as a clean slate? You sort of touched on this, but I'm wondering if you're seeing that in your conversations.
I think we get a much better answer to that question when people return to campus in just a few weeks, which is why I think the vice president has a tremendous opportunity with the Democratic convention next week to try to tee this up. There were two big reasons. Young voters in my travels over the last year were just apathetic about Biden. They agree with him on the abortion issue, LGBTQ rights, the climate, and other things. They're mad, furious, angry about Palestine. They think the president has green-lighted a lot of Israeli conduct that they find reprehensible.
Okay.
They also had no connection
get the
to him
idea,
because
right?
of his age.
I don't want to.
How come his conversations have higher status than my conversations or your? I mean, Matt, I know that you work 28 hours a day and are holed up in headquarters at Racket, but I basically drift around small town America in my truck. Oh, and big city America, if you count places like Salt Lake City and so on. And every time I hear these people on CNN tell me what they've learned by talking to people, I wonder which people they talk to. They ask these rhetorical questions and then they answer them in the names of the people they've talked to.
Yeah. Yeah. You never actually see them.
You and I talk to people in Milwaukee, and the kind of people we talk to and what they said are never reflected in any of these conversations.
No. No.
So, it's trick number 5 that John King goes in disguise. I don't know where, down to the wharfs or something, to the longshoreman bars, and finds out what the people are thinking.
I mean, here's why it's possible, though, Walter, because what happens when you go on campaign coverage is it's a bubble. Like you go from event to event, and you never really see anybody who's not kind of put there by the campaign. If you're traveling, if it's at a late enough stage of the campaign, you're pretty much with the traveling press, the candidate, and then whoever you get to see kind of at the rope line of the event. And that's pretty much it. And it's only a certain slice of person that you interact with. So that it's not a good way to do campaign reporting. Like I used to leave the Secret Service bubble and run a mile in any direction and do all my man in the street interviews that way.
Right.
But no, the kind of folks that like that you and I talked to in Milwaukee, for instance, and we talked to some pretty, there were some weird conversations that we had. Like
we didn't filter for weird, by the way. We just talked to the people who were driving or closest to us, and I'd say about 2/3 of them were more bizarre than I could have imagined.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, not even in a political way, just like,
right.
Yeah. So that's never reflected. And that's one of the things that's always suspicious to me about campaign coverage is you never see the non-voter reflected in coverage. Where's the person who says, oh, I think they all suck, I'm not going to vote? Like that quote is never in any campaign story. Right.
Our Uber driver who has to carry a gun and lives in a little town far out of Milwaukee and, trembles when he has to go into certain areas, but doesn't want Uber to know he has the gun on him. I mean,
yeah, no,
a lot of people like that.
Right. Yeah, there's people there. There are all sorts of opinions out there. Probably 7/8 of them don't qualify as something you would ever read in a newspaper, and that's what you get when you get that kind of. The kinds of people that I talk to reports, right? Like, but look, we do have to talk about the fact that there's been apparently a real movement in the polls. I mean, one thing that John King is really good at, he has a very good memory for the entire electoral map, all the different districts. He's been doing this for a long time. That magic wall is his baby. He treats it with affection when he's up there. It's kind of amusing, but there's a thing like the Rasmussen poll, which is very kind of friendly to the Republicans generally, has Trump down 3 today. So it's like a 9-point swing in the last 10 days. If you go just by Rasmussen, every other poll, if our magic producer could just take a look at the poll aggregates at Real Clear, you'll see basically Harris is winning almost everything. You have to go all the way back to like August 1st or 2nd before you start seeing a poll that has Trump. Oh, maybe that's not true. Those are just individual states. That's what you're seeing there. But she's winning in the polls according to all the national polls, and most of the sort of national predictions that have to do with the electoral map have her up as well. Do we believe that or do we not believe that?
I've adopted a formal position. It doesn't have to do with what I see on television. It doesn't have to do with John King's reputation or what he's saying right now. I am no longer in this age of information warfare going to trust the polls any more than any other source of data. They go into the hopper in some fashion, but their privileged position, back when it was the Gallup poll and the Harris poll, and then all the different ones that we have now, all of which people weight differently. And now that we have the Nate Silver composite polls, all are very interesting, but I can't help but remember that I was told Joe Biden was ahead at the time his party made him quit the race.
Yeah, and this is an important point, and we can take those polls off the screen now because they're. I'm not going to say they depress me, but the unreliability of polling, and I used to sort of always think that the Real Clear Politics site, and to a lesser degree the 538 site, they at least gave you some useful information because they were aggregating a whole bunch of stuff, and you learn something about something looking at it, right? Like don't take it as gospel. Don't think that it means the world that somebody's up 2 or 3 points at any given stage. But now it's all meaningless to me. I don't have any trust in it for exactly the reason you just mentioned, because when Biden was leaving the race, they were trying to tell us he was up. They clearly had access to some other polling that.
Well, they were telling us he was up nationally, but there were problems in certain swing states, I think. We talked about it at the time. We were a little bit incredulous when he was forced out because, we'd just seen that he was supposedly ahead. But it's not that, it's not their inaccuracy that is causing me to discount them. It's this. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, numbers in America were a little bit suspect in general. But nowadays, data has a huge amount of prestige. It's thought of as the only reliable way to understand the world because we live in the computer age. And so the temptation to use data to create narratives is higher than it's ever been. And as I say, the glamour of data is greater than it's ever been. And all I know is that for the last few years, I have seen every institutional resource in America, from the front page of the New York Times to the evening news to
the Fed,
used to economic statistics, frankly, used in some fashion to advance the interests of the dominant powers. And so that it would stop here doesn't make much sense to me. That there's some body of professional, I don't know, agents that are keeping the polling from being infiltrated by the same forces that have infiltrated everything else. I sat, like I've said many times, maybe here, on the night of 2016 and watched this New York Times meter that showed the likelihood in real time of Trump or Clinton winning go from like a 90% likelihood. This is the night of the election. Go from a 90% favorable to Clinton reading right down to zero. I mean, meaning she lost.
Right.
And so, and that caused me then to interview a guy. It was interesting, a sports book guy who ran a sports book in Las Vegas, and he just told me from his bookie's perspective, his sort of real world perspective, that the way you manipulate the line in betting is to manipulate expectations about who's going to win or not. And to him, it was almost funny that people would be so naive as to think that those manipulations don't take place in politics when they take place in sports, something much lower stakes.
Right. Yeah, and people in sports know that there's a reason why casinos make money, because they're able to spot the difference between the dumb money that chases the sexy team ahead of the big game versus the smart money that actually looks at what the actual performance of the players, blah blah blah. But why would that discrepancy not exist in politics? Well, it's supposed to be because we have stringent data journalists who are paying attention to this. And there was a moment when they were doing great, like in the Obama era. 538 Nate Silver, he was a baseball guy. Who, by the way, that site was a great baseball stats site, Baseball Prospectus, where he came from. He became this megastar because people love the idea of the predictability, these sort of micro gradations of politics that you could eke out little advantages here and there. This is, Moneyball, right? Like,
sure.
Everybody loved that story, but then it completely fell apart when Trump got elected, and now we're in this place where we don't even know whether the polls have any correlation to reality at all, or whether there's two different sets of them, or what's going on, right?
Well, and the other thing I've noticed this year, back to my prestige of data theme, is that there seems to be a war over numbers generally. There's a war over how many people are attending these rallies for Trump and Harris. Now, in the last couple of elections, there was really no competition for Trump's giant rallies. Hillary didn't really generally even attempt to have such things, and Biden most certainly didn't in COVID year attempt to have big outdoor rallies. Now suddenly that Harris is having them to somewhat successfully or very successfully. They're a metric again, and I'm seeing all kinds of sort of editorial shading as far as the way the numbers get reported. And we just had a Trump rally in Montana. I didn't attend it, but I know a couple of people who did. And it was a packed college stadium event with a big overflow crowd, typical of Trump events. But one of the guys who went, who had never attended one before, and I don't know even if he was a pro-Trump person, could not believe afterwards the reporting on the rally. I mean, he was flabbergasted. He was a normie who had not had any experience with slanted reporting of public events, and just was shocked that the thing he had just attended was being reported as some kind of a failure.
I think a lot of us are going to each of us is going to remember the moment when we first had that kind of road to Damascus confrontation with the reality that things are being skewed in this new direction. I mean, for me, that happened, I guess, in late 2016, the first time I started to see that kind of stuff. And then the Russia story was the big disillusioning event for me. But it definitely started during that election cycle when, you would see reporting talking about the crowd size at Clinton events, and that they were doing that on purpose because they were targeting certain kinds of audiences. And then you would, I went to cover Trump, for instance, at Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and I remember it was, this gigantic stadium. Is it on?
Against our servers, and saturated all of our data lines. Like basically hundreds of gigabits of data were saturated. We think we've overcome most of that, and so it's now time to proceed. But as this massive attack illustrates, there's a lot of opposition to people just hearing.
I was right about the satellite, Matt, the attack satellite.
And but I'm honored to have this conversation. I want to emphasize it's a conversation, and it's really intended to just get a feel for what Donald Trump is just like in a conversation. So it's hard to catch a vibe about someone if you just don't hear them talk in a normal way. And when there's an adversarial,
look, our numbers are
like
suddenly the crowd filling up.
Adversarial interview. So and this is really aimed at kind of open-minded, independent voters who just trying to make up their mind. So you can understand like what is what is it just like to have a conversation? So honored to Donald, great to speak. We had a great conversation yesterday. As you mentioned yesterday, if we could just record that conversation and post it would have been excellent. And I hope we can have something like that today.
Well, I think we will. I'm pretty sure we will. And congratulations, because I see you broke every record in the book with so many millions of people, and it's an honor. We view that as an honor. And then you do want silencing of certain voices. Usually those are voices that have something to say that are constructive, oftentimes constructive. And so we have to consider it an honor. But congratulations on breaking every record in the book tonight. That's great.
Well, thank you.
So there was a DDoS attack?
Well, that's what he said.
We could start off with, the
massive attack,
which was an incredible thing. And I have to say that, your actions after that assassination attempt were inspiring. You, instead of shying away from things, instead of ducking down, you were pumping your fist in the air and saying, fight, fight, fight. And I think that's, the president of the United States represents America. And I think that is America. That is strength under fire. And so that's, a big, part of the reason why I was excited to endorse you as the president of the United States for having another term here. is that was just incredibly inspiring. But I mean, what was it like for you?
Not pleasant. I have to be honest. I said there was blood. I had more blood. I didn't know I had that much blood. The doctors later told me that the ear is a place that is a very bloody place if you're going to get hit. But in this case, it was probably the best alternative you could even think about, because it went at the right angle, and it was a hard hit. It was very, I guess you would say, surreal, but it wasn't surreal. You know, I was telling somebody, you have instances like this, or like a lot less than this, where you feel it's a surreal situation, and I never felt that way. I knew immediately that it was a bullet. I knew immediately that it was at the ear.
Yeah.
And because it hit very hard, but hit the ear. And I also heard people shout, bullets, bullets, get down, because I moved down pretty nicely, pretty quickly. And we had bullets flying right over my head.
He even ducks well, Donald Trump.
The bigger miracle was that I was looking in the exact direction of the shooter. And so it hit me at an angle that was far less destructive than any other angle. So that was the miracle. That was, for those people that don't believe in God, I think we got to all start thinking about that. You have to, I'm a believer. Now I'm more of a believer, I think. And a lot of people have said that to me. A lot of great people have said that to me, actually. But it was amazing that I happened to be turned just at that perfect angle. And all because I put down a chart on immigration that showed that the numbers were so great. I love that chart even more
maybe
now.
It's a sign. Maybe that's a sign,
It's an immigration sign.
You highlighted a serious issue, and at that moment,
this is the EU.
You're but
caution,
missed your head. I mean,
so it's interesting the way
this
this is being reported. I guess we can talk about this later.
Sign, I said, bring down that sign on immigration, and it was literally about an eighth of a second where it would be good, and after that it was going to be a disaster, no matter which way you were facing. But it just had that perfect angle, which was exactly at this shooter. Very sad situation. Such a sad situation. As you know, we lost somebody that was great, Corey, who a firefighter, a great gentleman, a great Trumper. He was just a fantastic family and a fantastic man. And a friend of mine came up, Elon, and said, I'd like to give the family some kind of help. And I said, that's great. He said, do you mind? I said, I don't mind at all. And he wrote out a check for $1 million, gave it to the wife. And, she said, this is really nice, but I'd rather have my husband back, which is a nice thing for somebody to say, to be honest. She's great. The family is great. And we raised a lot of money for them, and for two other gentlemen are unbelievable people also. They were hit really badly. They thought they were not going to make it, and they did. The doctors in the Butler area, I tell you, they were.
That's what I
said.
Some funny commenters in there.
They were really hit tough, both of them equally. And we thought, my first question was, because I heard bullets flying over me, and I said, how many people were killed? Because we had a massive crowd there, a tremendous, thousands and thousands of people, and there was no land. I mean, it was all people. So I said, how many people have been killed? Because I knew there were other shots being fired. And they said, we don't know yet, but some people have been badly hurt. And I have to give the Secret Service sniper, they call him, or sharpshooter, but sniper, because he didn't know there was a problem. He's an extraordinary shot, obviously, and he didn't know there was a problem. And he was able to pick it all out within 5 seconds. And he used one bullet from very far away, I guess probably about
the deer
400
hunter
yards. The shooter was 130.
Western Pennsylvania, man. They only take one shot.
Inside of the field and the podium.
Let's turn this off for a sec, because there's stuff to talk about here.
Okay, number one, people are saying he sounds hammered. He kind of does, but he doesn't drink. He doesn't drink, apparently. Though maybe there are medications, who knows? But I will say this, back to the numbers thing. And they talked about the numbers first of all. Remember, Trump said, congratulations on breaking all the records. I think one of the reasons that some people were afraid of this event is that it will generate data that might be in Trump's favor. Anything that can be measured now and might create a narrative is especially concerning.
Yeah, I mean, there's a contest of imagery that's going on. Everybody, the Harris campaign is touting how big their crowds are, and there was a huge kerfuffle over Trump retweeting an accusation that there was a faked crowd photo. I don't want to get into, because I actually don't know the circumstances of like how fake that was, but it's a story that's all over the place. But clearly, this is an emphasis that everybody is worried about, is how much attention is being paid to the campaign. But this is a huge story also. If it's technical difficulties, that's obviously very bad for Musk. If it really was a DDoS attack,
that's what he asserted,
right? And so it's being reported in two different ways.
One, he's lying. Two,
right.
It wasn't that bad.
Yeah. So, like The Guardian, for instance.
That's good.
Musk says X suffering from massive DDoS attack, but you're also seeing headlines about glitches.
What was interesting, Matt, when the BBC reporter interviewed that I don't know where that woman was from, at the top of the show, that clip we showed, the first mention from the American was that Musk's interview with Ron DeSantis had technical problems. I thought that was odd. Why was she talking about that? It was an interview about the political dimension of the speech, and she was bringing up technical problems, as though that's some kind of a knock on things if it doesn't come off flawlessly.
And this hasn't. And immediately we already have headlines. Look, the New York Times. We're going to try to get it up, get that headline up on screen at some point. But the headline is, they have a big splashy headline: X Spaces with Trump is off to a glitchy start. Glitchy is sort of the word of the day. You remember the old Pee Wee Herman's Playhouse? Remember that show? They used to have the word of the day.
So Matt, it was clear to me from the interview that was done before the thing with before the spaces with the X person, that glitches somehow equaled failure. And I remember when that DeSantis interview happened, it was one of the first such things on the new Elon X, and they just ribbed him and roasted him endlessly about how it was a failure for DeSantis to come out and announce his campaign that way. It was a failure for X. And so we've had it again. So now we're going to get a story about what happened to the Trump interview, and it will fall along the lines that we've already seen.
Yeah, disaster, glitch, right? Those are going to be the headlines. There are already stories, and it takes, obviously, you have to sift through all of them, but there are already stories that are not reporting the one. Well, there are really two facts in the story. One, the thing didn't come off, on time. The other is that Musk is claiming there was a massive DDoS attack. That's what he tweeted, right? And I'm already seeing reports without that second element in it, even though those are the only two facts in the story so far that seem to have come out. But just to sidetrack for a moment, because I don't want to not get to this before this live stream is over, because it's just so it's so funny. This whole Joy thing. If we could put Glenn on screen for a second, Glenn Greenwald is the only person I think in media who loses his temper about media behavior worse than I do. And the thing about the unbelievable repetition of the phrase "the politics of joy." And remember, Walter, you and I saw this sort of birthed live on air last week, right? We were both saying, "What the fuck is this joy thing? Where did that come from?" Since then, it's been this cavalcade. Glenn is positively beside himself. He just keeps issuing tweets about it and being furious about it. And it really is remarkable. I mean, if we could look at the video too, the compilation is incredible. The Joy video.
Thing that I will not forgive them for is their try to steal the joy from this country.
The joy felt by Americans backing the Harris-Walz ticket.
We are joyful warriors.
Being joyful is part of the American identity.
The joy factor.
Campaign of joy.
You're talking about radical joy.
It is downright joyful.
It looks like a joyous rally. It looks like a joyous occasion.
A real zeal and joy in the campaign.
The joy that you're bringing back to the country.
Joyful, exuberant rally.
Thank you for bringing back the joy.
Power of joy.
Hope and joy.
Something incredibly joyful.
She does it all with a sense of joy.
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 Joy. Imagine that. American politics. Joyful again.
Well, first I got to do a paper tap. What do we?
Okay,
There's
nothing.
no memo. We don't get a memo on this stuff. But go ahead. Yeah, I'm sorry.
We don't get it, man.
We don't get a memo. Yes, I'm sorry.
But others do get it. We've had this discussion before. It's thought that there isn't an actual memo. It has turned out that in some case there is a memo. Sometimes it's even leaked. But you don't have to leak the memo when the people who are, leading the band raise the baton and start the orchestra. Joy is interesting. It's a word you never see in headlines. Do you see the word bliss in headlines? Orgasmic bliss? No, you don't see that, and you don't see joy either. It is such an excessively emotional word, and so odd in the context of politics, because honestly, it's the one emotion that probably no one in politics actually ever feels, except at the moment they win.
Right.
You know what? So what they're trying to do, in my mind, is pre-program a feeling of triumph in people, such that they're kind of, led. It's a technique in hypnosis. It's called leading and pacing. You lead people to the state that you wish them to ultimately, abide in. And so joy is where we're going to be. Joy is what's going to happen. There is nothing to me, growing up in the public schools of Minnesota and so on, more oppressive than enforced happiness. When I hear that, I have to have school spirit or this kind of thing, at church, in school, or any kind of organization, I actually recoil. And the end of 1984, let's remember, is all about the enforced joy that Winston Smith is
right.
Is directed to feel and to express. He loved Big Brother.
Right.
And so to me, nothing is creepier, nothing in politics or outside of it, than happiness on command.
Right. You must. 3, 2, 1, joy. All right. It's creepier than the Shepherd Fairy Hope thing, by far. Because
hope was a starter emotion. Okay. Joy is now what we've advanced to. Next time, like I say, it will be orgasmic bliss. Vote Waltz for orgasmic bliss. It's a form of programming. Like I say, it's so simple. It's emoji simple. It goes right into your brain. But to see these people attempting to organically articulate a talking point as though it just rose in their own soul, and in this case, the emotion that goes with it is just flipping astonishing, man. I mean,
and people have tried to compare this to what goes on in conservative media. There are obviously talking points that go on in Fox and OAN, the lying fake news media, the DEI candidate, right? Like that's more like dog whistling, I would say, right? But
I watch that stuff. I've never heard them tell me to have an emotion.
Exactly. This is different. As a right. I don't know. Go ahead.
Maybe pride. Maybe pride is the thing that they push. Before that word became an object of contention by the different sides, and
a DSA violation.
Yeah, but no, this is very advanced, and it belongs to the Democrats. This notion that we can have, and they used to be the party that was so suspicious of it. I mean, it really is Hitlerian. The only person I can think who would have had the shameless confidence to command that people be happy en masse is some kind of mid-century dictator.
Right. Even the Soviets, I think, hesitated to go there. Right. They had posters, they had images of it, but they wouldn't have had that repetition. And Walter, you and I are both writers. If an editor came to us and asked us to pretend that we spontaneously felt that emotion, we would recoil from that instruction, right? It is an absolute anathema to any free-thinking person to pretend that they have somebody else's emotion, or that you're going to repeat a phrase, the politics of joy, that somebody else thought up for you. Like, no way. Are you kidding me? Like, it's just
they often talk about the hive mind, but what we're seeing is the advent of the hive heart.
Right.
Not the mind that thinks in a coordinated way, but the heart that feels in a coordinated way. And this is like 1950s or 60s satire. It's like A Face in the Crowd with Andy Griffith,
right? Yes.
The demented populist hayseed, who or A Clockwork Orange, listen, Alex, you will feel joy, and then they put the syringe into his neck or something, or the machine on his head, and it's supposed to be infectious, of course. That's the great metaphor of the computer age, is contagion, right? Everything's viral and contagious. And, that's the metaphor that's used by the censors to uphold their position. Things must be stopped before they break out. But then you see a flagrant attempt to create a viral hysteria around a basic emotion, one rarely felt in real life, except at the birth of your child or something.
Right. Yeah. You just don't use that word unless you hit a walk-off home run in the World Series. I don't know. It's a crazy word to bring into politics, which is all about emotions that are somewhat farther down the scale than that.
Can you imagine a future campaign in which one candidate just gets up and says joy, 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 and the other one goes fear, 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 joy, 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 and both sides enact the thing, they dance, the other ones go like that. Who will win? That's basically where we are.
That we're almost there. Let's check in. We missed the toss, but let's just check in with Rachel here for a second. If we can we turn on the
is reportedly a foreign adversary who is doing this, and Lord knows why, but it's not for a good reason. It is to hurt us as a country. And our elections are our business. Foreign interference in any American election is bad. And every American, and certainly every American campaign, should not only be against it, they should insist that no one try to benefit from this, that no one try to engage with this kind of thing at all, that nobody invite this, praise it, reference what has been taken in this kind of a campaign. I mean, the Trump campaign is insisting that nobody should do that, which for them is awkward.
What?
Now, this just came out. WikiLeaks. I love WikiLeaks.
The Hillary Clinton documents released today by WikiLeaks.
Exposed by WikiLeaks.
We don't talk about WikiLeaks. They want to distract us from WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks. The WikiLeaks revelations. They got it all down, folks. WikiLeaks. Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find...
all right, we get it.
Man, I'm too smart for this. Some days I go, I've got to go on the air and cover the American election, which means I have to pretend to be dumber than I am. So what this is, whatever the hack is about, whoever did it, is an attempt to revive Russiagate, right? I mean, this is an attempt to re-inject the notion of foreign interference and especially Russiagate into an election that, hasn't yet had Russian interference, and they're doing it negatively by saying, how dare he be wounded by by an attack from an adversary when he celebrated one in the past. Even though it's never been settled that Russia did WikiLeaks.
Right.
And in fact, the head of WikiLeaks, Julian Assange, denied that they did it. The person who should know explicitly denied it.
Yeah, so they're gonna. I mean, look, there's an element of hypocrisy, sure, to complain about that, but of course the campaign doesn't have the Trump campaign doesn't have the right to tell people not to look at the material if it's real, right? They have a right to complain about being hacked. They certainly have a right to demand better security, all these other things. But the problem is the same one that the Hillary Clinton campaign came up against, which is, look, if the stuff's real, we're allowed to use it. That's the news standard. Adam Schiff today was tweeting about how news organizations need to be clear about the provenance of information, and that's the most important thing when we do reporting. Whereas that's absolutely not true. We are supposed to verify that it's true, and the provenance is supposed to be relatively unimportant. Even if people have bad motives in giving us a true story, we don't care. Put it on. But that's what they're going for. And yes, you can see the press needs to treat any information hacked and dumped through foreign interference operations with great skepticism and always disclose the provenance of materials they will report on, et cetera, et cetera. So, we've talked about this before, and this is the whole hack and dump thing. Like, this is the ostensible reason for stuffing the Hunter Biden story, but it isn't a reason. It wasn't a good reason in the Pentagon paper story, and it's not one now.
But Matt, how can I even discuss this story with a straight face, knowing that it comes from the same people who told me that Hunter Biden's laptop was a Russian disinformation operation, knowing that it comes from the same people who told me that the WikiLeaks was a Putin-inspired hack by Fancy Bear or whatever it was, and CrowdStrike weighed in to tell us that was the case. Never proven, right?
And by the way, we have a new story on Racket that suggests that maybe there was a little bit more DARPA to that attribution than CrowdStrike.
Right. So now I'm going to get all exercised one way or another about Iran hacking Trump. It's like, it's just air to me. It's just sounds that are going by. It's like hearing a calliope in the background. None of the institutions which are involved in this story have proved themselves credible in the past, and including the Trump campaign in some ways. So why should I believe any of it? All I know is that but what I do focus on is that they're setting up a principle here, which is interesting. Watch out for information with dubious provenance. What are they worried about?
Right, and we must establish the precedent of cutting that off at the source. That was the idea in 2020. We can't have hack and dump stories. Worry about provenance, not about factuality.
So what I'm hearing,
another Aspen Institute idea, but yes, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is a sort of pre-bunking of any potential information later on in the election that might be assigned to a state actor or some dubious hack. Okay, they're erecting a principle in advance of an election campaign on the basis of a story that I basically can't validate.
Yeah, right. Well, that's kind of where we are with almost any political story right now. We we're told things. There's no way to recreate the story in the lab, right? Like the old system was you put some stuff out there so that other reporters could follow up in the story, and chase it. Which is, by the way, even the story that Uncovered DC did last week. Tracy Beans, the site by Tracy Beans about the Tulsi Gabbard thing. She put enough in that story so that other reporters could follow up, which is how you're supposed to do it. And there is more coming out about that tomorrow, by the way.
Just today, Matt, or last night, they actually released, thanks to a Freedom of Information Act request, audio from Las Vegas emergency services around what appears to have been a medical emergency that Joe Biden suffered the night we were told he got COVID. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't seen it. No.
So yeah, you won't have to take this back. I promise you. I'm not getting you in trouble. There was some unknown medical emergency which caused Las Vegas to go to DEFCON 5 or whatever, in preparation for the president going to a hospital or something. And when this was originally reported or leaked, it was only on Twitter accounts and so on. It was not in any major papers or outlets, and it has not been in any since these tapes have been released by Las Vegas authorities. So we still don't know what happened to Joe Biden the night he caught COVID or whatever it was, and right before he was, successfully asked to leave. Put his candidacy aside. So I am having a hard time debating the merits or the fine points of various stories I'm being told when I know that the batting average of the sources I'm getting them from is 0.5.
And the cavalry doesn't come one way or the other. This is the problem with the way the system works now. It used to be that if a story broke, everybody would descend on it, and they would either move it forward, they would tell you more about what happened, and they would confirm it, they would give you other elements of the story, or they would say, we looked into this and we found it's not true, and here's why, right? We interviewed X, Y, and Z. But now there's just silence on these stories, and it just makes it very hard to sort things out, right? I mean, isn't that what you're saying? That this comes out. Where's the cavalcade of reporters who want to know exactly what happened on that day? They're just not there.
When I saw that it was true, what had been roundly dismissed as a rumor, that there had been a medical emergency, and I remember at the time being skeptical of the COVID story because he'd just been shaking hands. So if he had some infectious disease, what? I remember thinking a few days later, what kind of shape was he in when he resigned his candidacy? It would be important to know.
You would think.
Was he there with his wits about him and making a reasoned decision? Or was he lying on his back, recovering from some sort of event? Was he medicated? Was he not? And so on. We can't even get close to these common sense answers if we can't know that there was a medical emergency, yet there was. So the whole problem for you and me is that we are being obliged to comment on a stream of stories, which, except for the ones that we actually report.
We actually report on, which is a limited quantity of things we can do at once.
Right. Yeah. May not be true, and in fact now have a quite high likelihood of not being true or being modified by very important information that's not come out. And it's so, in other words, it's like we're two blind men at a baseball game reacting to what we're being told about the game.
Yeah, that sounded like it might have been a double. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. A couple more things. So that Rachel soliloquy at the beginning there, the the principled stand against foreign interference at a time when Britain is just overtly, undisguisedly messing with the American election.
Right.
It's unbelievable to me. And this is clearly not going to be a story anywhere tomorrow, right? This whole idea that, Europe is getting involved in whether or not Donald Trump can give an interview on X. Nobody cares. The stories instead are things. I mean, the New York Times had this remarkable headline before the event. It was something to the effect of Donald Trump or X is using its power for Trump, or Elon's using his power, and that's the only thing they're going to be focusing on. But I think this was a historic thing that happened tonight, and let's not check in on the interview again, because we'll probably go through it later.
And everybody will have a chance to hear it. But let me make one of my wild predictions. We heard or we saw a formal legal warning to Musk about holding the interview. It obviously would have pleased the EU had he canceled it, right? And it was certainly a warning which might have caused him to modify his questions or something. It was at least meant to do something like that. Then up comes the interview itself. Now, unless you believe that Musk is faking this, he says there was a massive attack. And I would guess that such as Twitter's network and technical wherewithal, that it can tell when that happens. Okay. Maybe not, but I would think there is something distinctive about an attack versus, a technical failure. Okay. But in any case, we had a warning and then we had an attack. Well, if the EU and those authorities over there actually believed that there was imminent danger of some sort of terroristic statement, would they not be authorized in some way to carry out a defensive measure? Perhaps. I mean, no, I'm not saying that they're arguing this, but we're getting precious close to the point where we're going to get an acknowledgement. Like I joke about the first drone strike, domestic drone strike, which will be launched at someone who's tweeting at that moment.
Right.
Their evil tweet will be the target data, and then I'm starting to wonder if we're going to get frank acknowledgements of actual real-time technical suppression of certain events. In other words, Matt, in Twitter files, in a granular way, we saw people, getting people pushed off social media platforms. But have we thought about the possibility that that might happen in a grand fashion, where the government just says, we shut down this channel. We shut down this platform. We've suspended it. Because when they move to that point, and when they show the confidence that it would take to announce it, we're in a whole new world. And I think with that letter, we're in a whole new world anyway. I compared it to the moment when the monster, which you've just seen the tail or the shadow of early in the movie, comes through the curtain completely. Right. And I think that's what happened today. The monster came through the curtain. And I don't think it's a far cry to the point where they just say, this interview won't be allowed to happen.
Well, I mean, I think this was one of the reasons why we wanted to do this live stream tonight. I mean, we scheduled it anyway, but we thought there was, I certainly thought there was a possibility that the EU would, at least in Europe, possibly block the interview in some way or de-amplify it, or there would be some kind of news to that effect. Who knows how to sort out what happened on X tonight? There's nothing new that points to anything like that. But I thought there was certainly a possibility that they could do that. And why do we think that's possible? Because there's already a precedent for this kind of thing, right? With the Hunter Biden story, there was actual action by Facebook and Twitter to intervene and completely suppress a story, so much so that people couldn't even share it in their direct messages, right?
People are forgetting that the Trump interview they're hearing tonight is with a man who was absolutely canceled from Twitter.
Right. Yes. Yes.
I mean,
removed
he
from
was
Twitter.
taken off completely.
Mhm.
Is it really that big a leap of the imagination? And it's not the imagination of logic to think that certain kinds of news events will simply be blacked out?
We also have the precedent of basically all the Russian channels being turned off instantaneously at a certain point after the invasion of Ukraine, which is sort of it's a new thing. Like that had never happened. I mean, maybe that happened in World War II, where you couldn't get access to foreign news, but in the internet age, I don't remember that ever happening, where we were suddenly shut off from foreign sources of news. So we're not far from that. We're certainly not far from. We've already seen efforts to de-amplify things. That was part of the evidence of the Murphy v. Missouri case. We've already seen, major news stories suppressed. We've already seen people, the president of the United States taken off by somebody, right? So why not?
We saw the New York Post taken off Twitter when it tried to report on the Biden laptop.
And blocked from its own account for 2 weeks, even after they admitted they got it wrong. So, I mean, when Twitter admitted it. So this whole thing, and now I think you're right about the letter. The letter is sort of an open declaration that this stuff is no longer going to be subterranean. This is going to be out in the open from now on. We're going to.
It reminds me of the hint stuff before the Nord Stream pipeline mysteriously blew up.
Right.
Well, what is the Nord Stream pipeline of information? And has it not been put on notice?
Yeah, and we talked about the events in the UK last week were sort of fascinating from an outsider perspective because it seems unthinkable here in the United States, preemptively arresting people for things they say, right? That or retweeting real images because that might inspire somebody to commit a criminal act. Like it's something that's very hard for Americans to wrap their head around. Like the truth is somehow inciting in a criminal way. But we're getting to a point where this idea that Donald Trump represents something that's close to being a terrorist figure who needs to be shielded, from whom the public needs to be shielded. It's not that unrealistic, especially in the context. I mean, think about it. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard being followed because she's a domestic terror threat. Somebody thinks like this, and I think it's probably a lot of somebody's, isn't it? I mean,
the most wanted list has expanded quite a bit. If you go on Twitter, you'll see that the hashtag Farage riots is extremely popular and has been, fanned ad infinitum. So there's Nigel Farage, there's Donald Trump, there's Elon Musk, there's Tulsi Gabbard. Now we find out.
A million years ago, Alex Jones, right? I mean,
that's been taken out. Steve Bannon, he's in jail. I mean, it's a slightly different matter that supposedly landed him in jail, but this is no longer Trump specific. And anybody who argues it isn't watching England, because there is no Donald Trump in England of any consequence. I mean, they have their own politicians who have been demonized. This is a tactic that can be used against any figure in business, politics, or probably entertainment. Have you heard from Kanye lately?
And on the left and the right, by the way. I mean, the Gilets jaunes the yellow vests in France, there was suppression over there. Any kind of uprising.
We saw all sorts of rules and recommended prohibitions around protesting Israel's Gaza actions. I mean, it's only people who really want to cling to their partisan identities can't see that these tactics can be and are being used in all sorts of ways, and on all sorts of sides. What we're really seeing is the rise of the right of some, certain kinds of organizations, these agglomerations of academia, media, and government to hygienically manipulate and filter our knowledge streams and our speech streams.
And they've normalized the idea that certain people are threats just by their very existence, or they're dangerous, right? The thing that was people missed, I thought, when we did the Twitter files, we didn't the story about how Trump was taken off the internet. We were just trying to get something historical there, just because we had a lot of stuff on it. There wasn't really a point to that. But what did emerge from those 3 stories that we did, and I did one, Schellenberger did another, Barry did the third one, was that they had to because Trump hadn't committed a technical violation that they could bounce him for, they had to concoct a new conception of incitement that was based on this broader sort of stochastic terrorism idea that it's the whole tableau. You have to look at the entire context of a person's online existence, and from that we can infer that maybe the person's entire personality or their overall online presence is dangerous. And that was something new. They had to create that because previously there was a standard that said this is a historically important person. We need to have them online for news reasons, et cetera, et cetera. They had to obviate that. So we're in this new world where they're just defining things as threats. And wow, is it creepy, I think.
Well, the next step is to issue warrants, to take down events, to prevent things actually from happening before they, prior restraint of news events or interviews. We're so far through the mirror, we're so far through the looking glass that we don't realize it. As I say, Donald Trump is speaking tonight as someone who was banned from social media, right? Yeah. So going forward, the question isn't just how do we cover these things, but how do we exist within a system that is hostile to our very presence? I've watched you, as your friend and as your colleague, I've watched you become the target of what I know, and you might not agree, are organized abuse campaigns on Twitter. For some reason, somebody finds it worthwhile to spend some money on bots that go after Matt Taibbi. I don't know how much they spend,
Right. I give them too much oxygen. That's my fault. But yeah, look, and part of that is because somebody, one of our commenters before, we talked about the cavalry not coming there, and what they said is the alt media is the cavalry now, and that's probably true, right? So anybody who's doing something in the direction of reminding people that this is fucked up, this isn't right, that's something that's going to be threatening to somebody, I think.
We saw last week around the Tulsi Gabbard story, which you helped develop, I think that's the word, an apparent attempt by Google to suppress knowledge of the story. I don't know how long it lasted. I don't know if the snapshots I saw of Google search represented, minutes, hours, days, but there was at least one point where Google wouldn't give you results on Tulsi Gabbard's surveillance because supposedly they were still developing.
Yeah, there were. You might want to wait for new information that may be coming in hours or days. I talked to some of the people who are involved with the whistleblowers in this case, and they saw that too. Because I was wondering, wow, what's that? Is there something coming out that's going to debunk this story? That's scary as a journalist, right? You see that, but how would Google know that? Why would they know that? that's weird. And it's a new thing. It's certainly, I think, effective in telling people that they shouldn't trust the sources that they're seeing. So these are all the sort of new tactics that are being rolled out against news media. And this, even this event tonight is just, it's just so amazing that we're being, gradually made accustomed to this as our new reality, when it should be just utterly shocking to us that this kind of stuff happens. I'm speechless at it, frankly.
Yeah, I've passed the speechless point. I mean, I've passed the shocked point. I'm trying to get a sense of what the pace of operations is and how soon we will reach certain sort of milestones, and what I'll be doing at that point and how I might survive the process. That's the way I'm thinking. I mean, I grew up in farm country. You don't go, I just saw that thunderstorm coming a bit closer, and then you go, and it's still getting closer. Can you believe it? No, at some point you unlock the storm cellar and figure out if you have water down there and food.
Right.
You can't just continually be amazed. What was the movie about, or the clip we saw about the avalanche where the father's sitting out on some Swiss patio at a ski area and there's an avalanche coming behind
Right.
them?
Yes. Yeah.
At some point you got to get up from the table, man. I mean,
it's like signs, right? When you see the alien fingers coming through the window, that's your cue to move to the basement.
I always tell my kids, don't be the people who in the World Trade Center decided not to use the staircase. Okay.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Like, use the damn staircase. If you're wrong, who cares? Like, I panicked and ran out of a building that was collapsing a minute early. That's not a sin.
Yeah, I always feel like Woody Allen once talked about how his strategy in a fight was to flee, FLEA, flee, and we need an escape route from this thing. I think it's long past the point where there's any kind of way that this movement is going to be stopped. It's in full effect, and things like tonight are an announcement that they're going to push boundaries to this that would have been unthinkable even a couple of years ago. So it's fascinating, but crazy.
There's only one reliable text, and it's not the New York Times, and it's not CNN. It's the novel 1984. And we, returning to the Bible, which I'll now refer to it as, returning to the Bible, we see that you're supposed to never know whether an attack is really an attack. And you're supposed to never know whether you're being watched or, just think you're being. And that uncertainty is the acid that eats through everything, and we'll never know whether it's just glitchy or there was really an attack. We'll never be allowed to have a settled sense of that. There are actually people now who I think are debating whether or not that assassination attempt was real. That they,
well, that's another thing. That story is just it's dead. Why is there not more curiosity about that story? I just don't. I mean, there's so many things I don't understand. But I do understand it, but it's frustrating. Well, before we sign off, I'd like to sort of ask the people who are in the comment section, because we got a lot of folks in here, and we weren't listening to the Elon thing. Was there anything that happened that requires us to chime in on, or that was particularly interesting before we sign off? Because I do think that doesn't really matter what was said in that interview. I think that what happened tonight was already kind of an amazing thing. That
it occurred, and that the people who wanted it not to occur were as vocal as they were, is the story. There's also a story in whether or not it was attacked, but I don't expect anyone to investigate it. It will be Elon Musk's word against all the people who call him, Citizen Kane.
Right. Yeah, everybody's sort of suggesting, and we're not missing much. Here's a comment. I turned it off twice, so good. We didn't miss much, but the story itself surrounding it was significant. Yet another crazy week in this campaign, which continues to be like the most unprecedented thing. Walter, you've covered presidential campaigns. There were weeks where it was duller than watching paint dry. There were entire campaigns that were like that. I seem to remember. I mean, there were a few that were kind of interesting. I guess the '92 Clinton campaign had a few moments, in there. The 2008 primary between Hillary and Obama was, a little bit lively, but compared to this, like there's nothing that compares to this that even in the same ballpark, not even 2016.
Well, election night, Bush versus Gore, and the weeks that followed were the most suspenseful and dramatic electoral events of recent decades. To me, they paled in comparison to what's going on, and it's not just the surplus of news and surprising turns and twists that marks this one. It's that the personnel are still even up in the air a bit. I mean, apparently the Democrats have settled on their candidates by a process that we still have no insight into, really. I mean, Biden, let's remember, Biden just gave an interview the other night in which he basically said he was pushed out. He didn't use that word. But he said they came to me and they said I was a drag, and I might lose things down ballot, lose races down ballot, and so on. And I went. But until he said that, we were all just speculating. So we don't know about his health. We don't know what happened in Las Vegas, and I'm not sure what the upcoming DNC convention is going to be like. Everything was settled in advance. There won't even, I guess there will be some ritual acclaim for the candidates. I did read an interesting story that Harris supposedly wants to minimize the celebrity quotient at the DNC because she's afraid that it's going to look like some out of touch Oscars ceremony, a Golden Globes nomination of Harris and Walz. That'll be interesting how they stage the thing, but we have never been purer spectators in some ways, Yeah,
we were watching live when they just announced, I'm now the candidate, ipso facto, whatever. Like it just happened. They didn't tell us how that happened.
We have more input into how popes are elected.
That's right. Yeah, and there's a schedule at least, right? You can lose, when they're gonna the smoke's gonna come out at least. Anyway, this was a crazy night. Someone asked, Walter, are you still confident that Kamala is going to be the candidate? I think that's a good place to finish off. I am relatively confident she's going to be the candidate at this point. I wasn't like 5 days ago, but I still haven't. I'm not taking that asterisk off yet.
I will say I'm relatively confident, but anybody who's watched the last few months and thinks that we're going to return to normal doesn't have the evidence on their side, right? I mean, the crazy thing about certain movies is that, in certain movies that the biggest thing that can happen is maybe an argument between two characters. And then other movies, that there are going to be murders. And in other movies, the way that sort of ground rules are set up, planets will explode. And this is an exploding planet movie. So have planets stopped exploding? Why should they? We're only in the first or maybe, middle of the second act. So I would think that by the rules of drama, which all these people know, first of all, because they introduced the whole idea of narratives and memes, not me. They turned these things into novels. By the laws of the drama, Galaxies need to explode now.
Yeah. We've raced past straw dogs, through the Avengers, through whatever the worst thing beyond that is. So anyway, absolute craziness. The only thing we can do is try to, do a little pirate radio to stay sane in the face of it. And thanks everybody for coming out. And please check in at Racket, because we got some stuff coming up this week that's gonna move some of these stories that we talked about forward, we hope. And Walter, great to talk to you, and I'll see you again later this week.
See you then.